Okay, it is 3 o'clock, June 11th, 2020, and this is the Panda Consulting's ArcGIS Parcel Fabric Workshop. And it's hosted both by Fairview Industries and Panda Consulting. And we're going to focus on the ArcGIS Parcel Fabric this week. Again, we're giving a shout out to Fairview Industries, Nancy von Meyer. This all really started when Nancy, who's been a good friend and of mine for a long time, she and I started talking about the fact that we needed some place where we could interactively go and talk and dig into various components of ArcGIS Pro and ArcGIS Parcel Fabric. And that's what started this all. Panda Consulting, most of you have already been in a couple of these, so we will go over this. Just to go over quickly the interface for GoToMeeting. The interface is fairly simple, but there are a couple of things you want to be aware of. Regarding the webcams, you can actually go and up at the top, there's a pull down which allows you to see either who's talking or everyone or active cameras and such. You might want to just leave active cameras or just who's talking on there. And then if you click over, there's a list for people that are in here. It will give you a list of everyone who's actually in the meeting at the moment. The next item over is a chat window, and it will allow you to go and give a chat, not just, you can type that chat to everyone, or you can do it to a specific person there. Finally, there are the settings for the audio and the camera. If you're having issues, you might check and make sure that that's in there valid. Our goal is that this is supposed to be an interactive experience. We want this to be really more like a conversation than a webinar. Very few slides. Matter of fact, you got like one or two more, and that's all you're going to see. It's an event. We want to communicate with this. We don't have anything that's set on most of this. So in order to do that, in order for us to be successful, we want you to ask questions. We have a couple questions we're going to go through, but we want you to ask questions. And then you're also going to see Chris. There he is. He's going to moderate.
I'm here.
Track the chat window so that as you have a question, go ahead and type it in the chat window. Brian will go, or excuse me, Chris will go and answer it. Brian, who's also hiding back there, Brian Kelly with my office, will go and he's also monitoring them and see. So we'll, between them, they'll see if they can answer it, or if not, they'll go and they'll interrupt and we'll open it up and have a full discussion on it. Just to let you know, we do send out these email blasts, and on these email blasts, they have the entire schedule with several links on them. But in order to go and get those email blasts, you need to go and subscribe. And on the bottom, there is a link for a subscription. And you can also go and subscribe, or you can unsubscribe to it. We want minimal information. We're not using this for anything else. It's just, we need your email, first, last name, and organization, and what format you want it in. And that's it. That's it. So, let us start. Last month, when we were going through this, we had a couple of questions. And we were looking for suggestions on what are we going to talk about this time, those sorts of things. So Chris, can you start me off with one? By the way, we're going to mute everybody with the exception of Chris. And then if you have a question, again, through the chat window, and we'll just make sure that it is given that way, and we can handle it that way better. Sorry. It also will keep the sound much more acceptable level. We won't get any dogs or anything else barking in the background. Sorry. Go ahead, Chris.
No problem. So the first thing, the first question that we got last time was pertaining to records and what's the difference between using a record and not using a record, what tools are available when you're using a record as opposed to not using one. So why don't you start there?
Okay. And really, that gets down to the core, the absolute core of the parcel fabric. Um, because the parcel fabric, and a little bit of background there, the parcel fabric is really about um, making sure that when you're building parcels on here, it is going to go and make sure that the parcels that you do build are complete parcels. All right. It is, it will make sure that, that, and I'm fumbling here a little bit. So let's talk about what is a complete parcel. So let's go into our database here and look at this thing and what this parcel fabric does. The parcel fabric is really nothing more than a controller that makes sure that everything is in compliance with the rules that you've established for it. All right. So that the question then is, well, what rules are established for it? And let's start with the topology rules, in that we have inside the parcel fabric, you have a set of topology rules. But the one thing you want to remember is that these topology rules are really structured around, or they really focused on the structure of your parcel. And so, for example, and let's go down to taxes here. So it has, for every single parcel type inside of your parcel fabric, you wind up with 6 individual topology rules. 5 of them deal with lines, and it basically says that on your tax parcel lines, for example, they all have to have a point on the end of them. They have to have a point on the end of them. And that those lines cannot have dangles. They have to connect up to one another. Next, that the lines can't self-intersect. They can't be on top of one another with themselves. And then that they cannot self-intersect. They should not overlap on one another. And then the final line topology rule is that the line has to be covered by the boundary of a polygon. So those are the 5 line rules that are part of the topology that are built into every single type of parcel that you're mapping inside the parcel fabric. And then you have one polygon rule, and that polygon rule says that every polygon has to be covered by a line. It doesn't have to be covered by a unique line, but it has to be covered by a line on there. All right. So that these 6 topology rules, they manage and make sure that you have what are defined as valid parcels. And by parcel, I mean any sort of a thing that you're mapping, whether it be lot parcels or subdivision parcels or tax parcels or whatever. It's a parcel. So that's what the topology rules do. And the parcel fabric makes sure that those 6 rules are complied with. Now notice, by the way, those rules, they don't say anything about how the tax parcels have to relate to one another, or whether or not they overlap, whether they have gaps on them or anything else. These are purely structural topology rules on them. And that's what it starts with. If you wish to go and build it out to something else, you can always add topology rules in here. But right now, when it comes out of the box, these are the 6 rules that are in here. And the parcel fabric itself just makes sure that those rules are complied with. Now you can also have other rules in here. For example, I could go over here to my design and look at, and I have rules not just for the topology, but I have rules for my attributes. And I can say, all right, that on my tax polygons, I want to make sure that you calculate the calculated area field on this. Make sure that's always calculated. And that if I fill something in on one field, go and put it and copy it into another field, or go and modify what I put into one field here, go and modify what I put into one field and put it in a different field. So there's these attribute rules that the fabric makes sure it complies with these. These are other types, and that's a calculation attribute rule. There's also constraint and validation rules. And constraint and validation rules mean, for example, that you can't build a subdivision lot unless it's inside of a subdivision polygon. Those are the types of rules there. Or a validation rule might be that you don't want to build a meets and bounds description if it doesn't close. So the constraint will make sure that you're not allowed to do something that breaks that rule. A validation rule will make sure that that rule is complied with and ask you to go back and fix it when you do it. So again, these are the rules that the Parcel Fabric enforces. Make sure that you go and do those. I'm getting around to records. I'm getting there. I'm getting there. But I'm telling a story. So the Parcel Fabric itself is this controller that makes sure that the rules are complied with. Right? And the way it does it is through the use of a technique called a rule. So the rule is in fact a feature class. Matter of fact, if I go over here to my layout and I look, I see here, I have a feature class, and it's a polygon feature class. If you can actually see the icon here, it's a polygon feature class called records. And the record is sort of the gatekeeper. You have to have a record in order for the Parcel Fabric to be able to go and make sure that those rules are complied with. Right? So a record is critical because the record is the gatekeeper, or the record is the trigger. It depends upon the metaphor you want to use. You have to have a record to go and make sure that the Parcel Fabric is going to go and do the work that it's supposed to do. Right? So let's explore the records a little bit more. And in this case, it is a feature class. It is a polygon feature class, which has a couple of different attributes on it. It has a name. It has a recorded date. There's some other default ones, such as, if I go in here and look here, by default, there's record type, which, by the way, was something that Azure brought over. In 2.6, that's disappearing. You can have it there, but it's not needed anymore. There is COGO accuracy, which is also disappearing with 2.6. There is global ID. Global ID is very critical. Global ID field on here is the key to everything. So that once you have a record, that global ID for that record becomes sort of a stamp that gets marked on everything that was either created or deleted by that record, so that it allows you to go and track the lineage of everything that's associated with your parcel. So how does that work? Let's go in here and let's create a record. By the way, right up here in the upper left side, if you have a Parcel Fabric in your map document, this is called the record hub. And if I create a record here, I'll go over here and I'll call this test record. I'll spell it correctly. Test record, and I can put down when I created this and stuff. By the way, there are no required fields in here. The only thing that it does have is that the name has to be unique, and it goes and fills something in there every time anyway. So in this case, it shows you, it filled in who the user was and what day and time I actually created that record. But you can put anything in there you want. So I can create a record here. Once I have a record, I can go and build my parcel, and it's going to keep track. So if I go over here to records and I say create, in this case, I'm going to go down here and I'm going to create a tax parcel polygon. When I create that tax parcel polygon, if I go over to the attributes of it, I'm going to see that I have here created by record. That global ID that's on that created by record attribute field is the global ID of this record polygon. So it keeps track of it. It says, okay, when you created this thing, it was linked to that record. And that's really what you can think of it as. This is a link. This is, in Arcmap, we talked about joins and relates, and this was a foreign key. This was the key that was used to link these two together. Is this created by record? So within the parcel fabric, I now have a polygon. It's not a parcel yet, but it's a polygon. If I clear this out, I can see that it's a polygon, but it has no lines on the outside of it. And it has no corners on the end of it. So it's not a real parcel yet until I tell it, make sure that you build this. Make sure you build everything that's in my record. So the first thing I want to do is I want to go over here and I would check and say, well, select anything that right now is tagged with my global ID. It's part of this active record. And there it is. There's the features that I've built while using this active record. And then I can go over and say, go ahead and build my parcel that I've built part of now, finish it off for me. And I can say, go ahead and build this. And I don't even have to have it selected. It will know, oh, everything that's on my current active record, check to see, make sure all those rules are complied with. Again, the parcel fabric, make sure that the rules are complied with. So I can say, go ahead and build it. And when I say build it, if you were watching, suddenly now I have lines on it and I have points on the ends of it. So the parcel fabric made sure that I complied with the rules that are associated with this parcel on here. If I go in here and now say select everything associated with my active record and go back here, I can see that I have these lines. And if I click on a line, it will say, oh, it was created by this active record, and that global ID is the same as this one, it's the same as this one, and this one, and this one. They were all the same global ID. They're all related back to that parcel fabric in there, or excuse me, that record on there. Okay, so the record stands as the link between everything. But if I don't have a record, for example, if I go and click over here and I close my hub up, I don't have an active record now. So when I go in here and I say, well, let's go and build a polygon again, do that same thing I did before. All right, I now have a polygon. But when I look at that polygon, my attributes, it does not have anything associated with that created by record. It is not related to the record. Therefore, if I were to go and build it, it would say, this isn't part of a parcel. So don't build it. So again, Parcel Fabric is going to check and make sure that the records are in full compliance with all the rules that you establish when you go and build them. All right. And if you don't have an active record, everything that you do doesn't get tagged with a global ID to a record. So it's really not part of a parcel. All right. So I'm going to unmute you again, Chris. So the question then is, well, if I create something and my record is not active, I don't have an active record, can I take what I created and make it so that it is part of this record? If I've made that mistake, it started building before I had an active record in here. Yes, you can. So I can click on this menu here and say, whatever I have selected right now, also assign this to my active record. So it'll go and take that. And now, if you saw, it actually went and put the global ID of this record into that. And I'll go and undo that first. And you'll see it disappear here on the created by. And when I redo it again, it now assigned those features that were previously not part of this record to that record. So it's a way to go and manipulate things and both create things that are part of a record or create things that are not part of a record that you want to make them part of that record. And then, again, when I say build, it's going to check my record and say, everything that's associated with this record, is it in compliance with the rules? Does it have lines? Does it have points? Does it have a polygon on there? So it's going to go through and test and make sure that that's all in compliance with the rules. That, my friends, is the Rosetta Stone for the ArcGIS Parcel Fabric. That's the way it works. That's all it does, is it sort of checks all the rules. Now, I'll sometimes go and describe this as the Parcel Fabric is super topology, but it's really more than that. It really is sort of a controller to make sure that all the rules are complied with. And the rules are topology rules, but there's also the attribute rules, the constraint rules, the validation rules, all of those rules. The Parcel Fabric makes sure that it complies with all of them. Okay.
Frank,
All right.
Victoria has a question. Victoria, do you want to ask the question directly or do you want me to relay it?
I can. All right. So what about the importer records that are importer parcels? They all have records? I thought we deleted the default record from Arcmap because it was too big.
Okay. So here, so there's special considerations that you need to make when you bring things in from the Arcmap Parcel Fabric. Okay. The Arcmap Parcel Fabric, you actually use, now let's go to geoprocessing here, and let's go to toolboxes. Inside of here, there's actually a script called the upgrade parcel or upgrade Arcmap Parcel Fabric. And what that tool does is it attempts to go and build records for, again, ArcGIS Parcel Fabric records for everything that's in the plan table of the Arcmap Parcel Fabric, which works fine if you were really diligent inside of the Arcmap Fabric and you had a plan for everything. Because again, it wants to make sure that everything is associated with a parcel. So again, this is still pretty new for a lot of people. So Esri especially was saying, well, you know, when you bring it over, there's a problem because inside of the Arcmap Parcel Fabric, there is a thing called a default map plan that if you don't assign a new plan to everything that you're doing, it creates this map plan, which is a generic plan that was easy enough to work with. You didn't have to deal with it. The problem is it was an unseen consequence that when you do an upgrade, that becomes problematic because one of the properties of a record is that, and I'm going to go and show you here because I'm going to go and turn my records on, is that it creates a geometry of here's my test record, here's my test record, here's the recordation date on it. By the way, these are leftover from the last time I did this. So it creates a geometry, all right? So the problem with it is that your map plan, if you never really used the plan table inside of Arcmap Parcel Fabric, that when it brings it in, that map plan basically covers almost all of your parcels. So you wind up with this huge geometry that it struggles with. It's almost as bad as going and building, go ahead and building the Arcmap Parcel Fabric with a whole bunch of densified curves. There is a performance hit on it because it tries indexing that and topology elements on here because over here, there, if I go to topology again and go to properties, there's actually, I think is here. There's connections. Maybe there aren't topology rules for, I thought there were topology rules for that records feature class. So it winds up getting this really big record, this big polygon. So the recommendation early on was, well, what you do is you just take and delete that record. You have to do a bunch of cleanup, delete that record, and then go back and build the polygons associated with, that old map record, that old map plan. But there's a problem with it that we've discovered, in that when you first bring it over, the plan knows what lines go with what records. All right. So when that upgrade comes in, it says, oh, here's the lines that go with that record. So it automatically goes and marks not just the polygon, but the lines with that record. Well, when you go and bring it in and then delete the map plan and then rebuild records for the polygons, it doesn't know what lines went with it. So you wind up with records that are purely associated with the polygons, but not necessarily associated with the lines that we use to create them. We've developed a way of going and correcting this before you upgrade. Sorry about that, Tori. Before you upgrade, because we've recognized recently that it is a problem. You want to go and fix that before. Now the question is, to what extent is it a problem? We're not sure yet. We haven't seen any real negative things to have lines that don't have records associated with them, but I mean, they're still comply with the rules. So we'll have to see. By the way, Brian is reminded me a little while ago. This probably is one of those deep dive things that we want to talk about sometime. This might be too deep for what we're at right now, but the relationships between the records and the lines and the polygons and the upgrade script and what works and what doesn't work, there's a lot that we're learning about on here. The more we use this, that it might be more than this is involved with. So, yeah. So I'm going to stop there, Tori. Okay.
That's fine.
Okay.
The only other thing is, if it doesn't have a record, we can still correct it without doing. That's the other thing I really don't understand. I mean, in Arcmap, you had to start editing, and I don't understand why there's two levels there.
Yeah. So it's actually the easiest way to explain it is that the record is used to keep track of the changes that you make. All right. But you can make those changes either with a record or without a record. All right. So if you think about it, in Arcmap, what we used to do is we used to have two different things that we would do. We would go and do transactional mapping. In other words, we would get a deed come in, and that deed would say we want to split this parcel. And we would do it, and when we split the parcel, it would take the existing parcel and make it historic. All right? So that those valid historic deeds were caused by legal transactions that we were going and mapping. But there was also that other thing that we would do, in which we would go and clean up our data, because nobody's data is perfect. So that we would do cleanup. And while we were doing cleanup, while we were fixing things, while we were remapping things, the Arcmap Parcel Fabric was always creating history. It was always taking them and tracking them and making them history. Well, if we were diligent and watched what we were doing, we would go back and delete those historic parcels because they really weren't historic. It was just cleanup. Inside the ArcGIS Parcel Fabric, what they've done, what Esri has done with this, is they've allowed us to go and flip a switch. All right, they've allowed us to go and flip a switch that if we don't want to mark things as historic or we don't want to track them, all we need to do is close up our hub and say, hey, stop watching me on this. I'm going to do something to clean it up. I don't want you to keep track of what I'm doing. I'm just cleaning things up. And that's really what this is. This is only about, do I keep track of this or do I not keep track of it? All right. So that's the main function of that hub and of whether or not you have a record associated with it. But there's an interesting thing with that. So if I have a hub, and if I'm watching my record tab, I can see certain things turn on or become enabled, and I can see other things turn off. So when I disable this record, when I don't have an active record, I will see, for example, the show only active, that disappears. Over here, create seeds will disappear. Build, I think, disappears. Create and modify, these are all really just shortcuts to the create features pane and the modify pane. So they'll stay active, but this, I think this might stay active. So let's see, if I go and close this out, show only disappear because I have no active record. So how can I only show it? And then copy lines to and seeds, they disappear. The build active record disappears. Interestingly, the build extent is still there because I could still build everything that's in my current drawing extent. I don't have to have an active record to do that, but that's still active. Create and modify, they're over for my pane, so they're just shortcuts. And my align parcels, because I don't have a selected parcel here, that's not active either. So this allows me to sort of turn certain tools on, one could say parcel fabric tools. I'll actually say that there are certain record activated tools on or off by whether or not I have an active record. Okay? Great question, by the way. Great way to start. Yeah.
One more follow-up. If, all right, say I have a 50-year-old subdivision and I need to redo it. I want to fix it. It's bad. What would you recommend? Do I make a record for it and fix the whole thing, or do I correct it without the records? And then the answer probably is it depends.
You know me well enough to say that, right? It depends. Yeah. So if you wish to keep track of it from that point forward, or if you wish to go back and be able to say, hey, let me go over to that record and let me find out everything I did with that. If you want to keep track of it, you'll make it a record. All right. Now, whether you keep the old record and assign all that new stuff to that record, like I just showed you how to do, or whether you create a new one and delete that old record, create a new one and build everything with that new one, that's really up to you. But think of a record as being a way for you to keep track of what's happening. I can tell you, and again, I can say some of these things without breaking my non-disclosure agreement. I can tell you that that one of the things that is coming is a more intensive use of records to be able to show lineage. Show me where this parcel came from. How did it get split? And you can sort of envision it that if you're tracking things with a record, you then have information. What did it create? What did it delete or retire? All right. Because that's the other part of this, is that not just does it track what you created, but it tracks what you deleted and marks that historic on there. All right. So again, a record is used to keep track of things. It's also used as sort of the key to being able to run the parcel fabric, because in order to go and check all those rules, it has to be things that are associated with a record for it to go and check them. Okay, good. Great question. Really good. In some ways, we might have gone a little bit deep, but I think in other ways, it's a good introduction to the fabric, and sort of the intent of the fabric was to go and make sure that what you're doing, what you're mapping, you are doing it so that it is complete, that it goes and matches a set of rules, and that you are keeping track of what you're doing. All right. That's where the parcel fabric is, and where it's heading from this point forward is, how do you go and keep track of these things? How do you make sure that you've got a good quality parcel data set that you're working on and building from? All right. So do we have any other questions in here?
Amanda says she has one, but
Yep.
Okay. Amanda, you can we turn Amanda's mic on, Christopher?
Let me see here. I'm not able to. Are you?
Okay, let me make you the organizer. There you go. So you can do it now.
I don't know if she has one.
Amanda, do you have a mic? If not, why don't you go ahead and type in the question for us? Let's see if I can unmute her. I can. There you go, Amanda.
There we go.
You're unmuted. Go ahead. Amanda. Oh.
Hello?
Amanda, yes. Can you talk? Go ahead.
Yeah, can you hear? I'm sorry, I accidentally hung up the phone.
No worries.
Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. So what's your question?
All right, so we are as you guys know, we're migrating to Enterprise Portal. We do have our Parcel Fabric upgraded into a test environment. And we recently had an issue with the clip tool, and I couldn't figure it out. I kept doing everything you were doing in your video with the clip tool. And I even looked at some documentation on GeoNet and also through the help files in ArcGIS Pro Online. And I could not get it to work until I deactivated the active record. And that was something that Esri suggested. So what's up with that? And you guys ran across that, and how is that all of that managed on the lineage side of things? If you have to deactivate the active record in order to use the clip tool, for instance.
Okay, so let me ask you a couple questions. On your Parcel Fabric, when you went just before you published it, what release of ArcGIS Pro did you create that Parcel Fabric?
You actually upgraded it for us, and it was back in October that you delivered it to us.
Okay.
And when I published the feature service for editing, we were already in 10.5 at that point. But you may or may not have been in 10.5 when you upgraded our fabric.
So there's an interesting bug that is, and I call it a bug. It might not be a bug. It might be a feature. All right. And that, one of the interesting things that Esri is enforcing on this is that you cannot go and mix versions of the server software and the Parcel Fabric and have mismatched versions. And we did encounter this bug on another client in that we had created a Parcel Fabric using ArcGIS 2.5. When you create one, it creates it in the second version of the Parcel Fabric, the second structural version of the Parcel Fabric. But their server was on 10.7.1. 10.7.1 only will work with release 1 or the Parcel Fabric that's been created with 2.4. If you have a newer structure in the enterprise software, you wind up with that exact bug. The clip doesn't work right. All right.
So we are supposed to be able to have an active record.
Yes.
We are supposed to be able to have an active record when using the clip tool. Okay.
Yes.
So I need to check what our enterprise server, our enterprise portal server.
Yes.
I need to check that to see what version
release
it's in
is
to make
that
sure
on?
it's active as well.
Yeah, you want to check both things. You want to check both things. First, you want to check to see what is the published version of the Parcel Fabric. So you want to take our catalog, go over to the fabric, right click on it, say properties, and look at this. What version is that? All right, and if it says 2
inside of this,
inside your portal, when you're opening it up with ArcGIS Pro, you should be able to go and see that. You'll be over on portal, and you'll actually see that blue icon. You can right click on that and go to portal.
I said
okay, and right click on it. It will tell you what version that is. You want to check to see if that's 1 or 2. Then if you go to your enterprise server and see what release of enterprise it's using, whether it's using 10.7.1 or 10.8. Again, they are now enforcing that the Parcel Fabric release 1 only works with 10.7.1. Parcel Fabric release 2 only works with 10.8. The version coming out in 2.6, which is the Parcel Release 3, only works with 10.8.1. And what that means is that as you upgrade these databases, as you create these parcels, and when you create that parcel, you want to be aware of what level of enterprise is going to be used for that, and you have to match them together. If you don't match them together, little bugs pop up. It's frustrating. I was really frustrated. I was actually up in Idaho when we first discovered that, because we had thought, oh, you can use this between them. You could with Arcmap, but no, it's being enforced now. So it's just a warning. You have to match the release of the fabric with the server software. And I think that I saw the other day in a meetup, let's see if I can find this here. Is somewhere in here that at the very bottom they have a note now about this very same issue. That's not it. Sorry. Anyway, there is a note now on their help for the Parcel Fabric.
Okay, I'll do some.
Yeah, and if it turns out that you can give me a call sometime and we can look at it and see what's going on there. But in fact, it does work. I've got a couple clients. As long as you keep those two together, and I'm surprised that Esri, I guess it depends upon who you contacted for support, whether they knew that or not. But yeah, that's one of those little idiosyncrasies of it on here. So, all right, but that's, again, good question. Thanks for going and talking about that. That is something really important. Matter of fact, when we go in to migrate somebody, the first question I always have now is like, what enterprise server software are you going to be using? Because that way I know what level to go and create on this. All right.
Okay. But we still have to be in the right version ourselves because we have to publish the feature service into Enterprise Portal.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it has to be upgraded in the same version. It has to be published as a feature service in the same version on the software, on the server.
And on the desktop, just to go and reinforce that on the desktop, so that if you're keeping with the first release of the Parcel Fabric, Enterprise Server has to be 10.7.1. It has to be a release 1 structure, and you have to use ArcGIS Pro 2.4, and the latest patch is 2.4.3 to go and edit it. If you don't keep them in compliance, there's little bugs that will pop up.
Okay.
Sorry.
Thank you.
Yeah, sorry. All right. So, what do we have any other questions, Chris, or anything else that you've thought about as far as questions on here?
Nothing in the chat, but we do have a question from last time.
Okay.
Within Pro, there are multiple ways to construct a line with COGO attribution attached to it. So maybe you can speak to all the different workflows in regards to that.
Yeah. Good question. Good question. So let's explore COGO a little bit and look at the different ways that we can do things. So inside of a COGO enabled structure, we now sort of want to reinforce that there has been a change between Arcmap COGO and ArcGIS COGO, in that things, for example, like the bearing field or the direction field, It's no longer a string value. It's not a text field. It's actually a number field. And that number field, you want to make sure that that number field is marked, that in fact it's decimal degrees, and you want to display the values in quadrant bearings. And it's a number field because they're going to start calculating how much rotation appears on these things by what's stored against those lines. And then things like the distance field, it's not a text field anymore. It's now a number field. So the direction field is now number. The distance field is now a number field. The radius field, arc length is still still a number field. These are all number fields. The second radius, what's the second radius for? That's in fact for an ellipse. Those are all number fields now. So you just want to be aware of that a COGO enabled line inside of ArcGIS has number fields, not string fields anymore. All right, first difference in here. So then let's talk about sort of from the most traditional on down to some other ways to go and build things. So normally what you would do is you would say, well, let's do a traverse. And with a traverse, again, we want to go and make sure that we set the types of lines. In other words, what type of lines are we going to be creating? And then where does the line start? In this case, I can start it here. And then I can start inputting these COGO values. Now, these COGO values will immediately be stored on the lines that are being created. Again, another difference between ArcGIS Traverse and the Arcmap Fabric or Arcmap Traverse is that every time I hit return here to create a line, it is literally creating a line. It is not just drawing a sketch, it's creating a line. So that if I say, 45 degrees in the southeast quadrant, southeast, all right, and I hit enter, and I tell it, where am I at here, 500 feet, all right, it actually created a line there. And if I look in here, well, I haven't got a selection on there, but it actually created a line there for me. And so now if I go 45 degrees in the southeast direction, for that, it created a line. These are now existing lines. And if you'll note, it's actually already putting the label on there for those lines. So I'm just going to real quickly finish this out. Excuse me. Go back to here. So I have now created a closed traverse, but it has already stored those lines for me. Closed traverse, it automatically calculates what this is. A couple interesting things about this. I can take this closed traverse and I can say, well, let me take and move the starting line of this so that instead of starting there, maybe it was supposed to be starting over here, and it will go and move the entire traverse on here between the points where it's actually starting. All right, so I can move those lines that are associated with part of this. By the way, I don't have an active record. Just sort of to let you know, I don't have a record. Not a good idea. I should have paid attention. But when I do this, it automatically goes and says, okay, those are all lines. I can now stop the traverse by hitting the back button. Let me go back here and create a record. And then let's go and select these lines again. Select these lines again, and I'm going to assign those lines to this record. Okay, so that those lines, if I look, they have the bearing recorded, the distance recorded, and they have created by record here, also recorded for all of those. So the traditional way that we would think of doing this is that we would go and use the traverse tool to create a set of lines for us. But there's other ways to do this. If I go in here and I say, let's create parcel lines, I can click here, and then I can go and right click using just a simple line and say, let's do direction and distance. And I can say 45 degrees southeast, and I'm tabbing now 500 feet and do that. And if I look at this, that's actually also got my COGO on it. All right. So again, I could go in here and let's go back to create. I go in here and by just using right click constraints, I can also build a line. And this becomes really interesting because maybe I want to go and build a curve, and the traverse tool, I don't quite know how to do it with the traverse tool. It's a little weird if you've never used Arcmap Parcel Fabric. So I want to go and build a curve here. So I can go and build a curve, and by right click and say, I want to do a circular curve. All right. And I can tell it whether or not it's tangent. It's tangent from to here. The radius, let's say 50 feet in the right direction. And I can change this and say a central angle of 90 degrees. And I want it to be right. Let's change this so we can see a little bit more what this is. And if I build it using these constraints, I actually can see it before I actually hit return. So I've got a lot of clients that, because they struggle with learning that traverse tool, they'll often use this as a way to start and say, okay, let's start with this. All right. And now that I hit it, I then go over here and I have, here is my direction. The direction, by the way, is the chord bearing on here. My radius was 250 and my arc length is 392.70. Notice it doesn't have a central angle or a delta angle attribute field anymore. That was one of the things that they decided to not have in here. So you can go and input this by just going and using the constraints that come when you right click on here. That's another way to go and build a line without having COGO on it. So what happens if I just go in here and say, well, this is supposed to be, it's 250, it's supposed to be 250 feet, sorry, 250 feet. It goes and gives me the constraint here, so I can't make it anything but 250, but I don't have anything on the bearing. So when I click on that, what do I wind up with? If I look over here, I wind up with the distance, whatever I had input into that constraint, that gets stored, but nothing for the direction gets stored. And notice on here, on the labeling, it tells me in magenta or pink, however it shows on yours, that in fact, it's a different color. It's not black, and it's not like blue for the radius, it's pink. And it's pink because it's telling me I don't have complete COGO values for this line. It's incomplete COGO. If I were to go over to my attribute table and say, well, maybe that's supposed to be north 45 degrees west. Instead, when I do that, if I look at the label, it now says, oh, now you have complete COGO. I will make that black to say, okay, you've completed the COGO on all of this. All right, so again, traverse, you can put it all in. And I can then use the constraints on here and do it that way. It's a second way to do it. Or if I just draw the line, I can go in here and actually fill it all in and then make sure that it has COGO attributes on there. The other question I have is, do I need COGO attributes to build parcels? Now remember, all of these things were part of this active record, so they're all getting marked with the global ID of that record. If this was parcels, if this was a subdivision, my next step is to identify where the parcels, where the polygons are going to build. So I would do what's called a seed. I would create the seeds, and if I noticed, I now have two little blue dots here. Those blue dots signify that I have two closed polygons, and it's going to create two parcels for me as a result of these lines. Earlier in the workshop, I created polygons and then had the parcel fabric build the lines and the corners for it. This time I'm drawing lines, checking to see where they form polygons, and I'm going to have the parcel fabric go through all the rules and say, okay, you got lines. Do you have corners? No, you don't. Do you have polygons? No, you don't. So I'm going to build them all now from that. So I can say build this active record, and it will build now my polygons for me. Again, those are all still marked with that same global ID, but I will build them all out. But again, I don't need to have COGO in order to be able to build a parcel. I just need a line that's now on top of the boundary of that line. All right. Do we have any questions yet?
One I just thought of, Frank. When you create the seed, it requires a closed polygon. What is the misclosure allowable, or is there a setting that allows that it'll build to if there's misclosure?
I don't know. I suspect it might be something like, knowing what I know about where this came from and how some of the coding work, it might be 1/100th of a meter, but I'm not sure. It's a good question, because I can tell you that I have had instances where I've built lines. I go in here, let's go to create again. I'm going to go to lines. I'm going to build some lines. And I built a line, and this is going to close, but I've built a line and I went to build the seed and it didn't build. So there was a misclosure. What I did in that case is, since I couldn't get it to build, I'm pretty sure it closed. I actually went over to create feature and I said, let's create a seed right there. So I created my seed by hand and then said, go ahead and build this, and it still built it out. So even though it might have been that there was a misclosure in there, it's still, because I had a seed, it took that seed and expanded it out and let it at least build it. So it's a great question. I don't know what that limitation is yet, but that is a really, really good question on this. All right. Now that I've got this really weird shape, I'm going to go and manipulate a little bit way, because some of the questions I have sometimes through some of my training is that I've built this and it doesn't match up to the existing stuff. How do I get it to match? And the sort of minor adjustments, sort of around the edges, they have a tool in here called align parcels. It's a nice tool. It's for those of us that worked in the Arcmap Parcel Fabric, it's comparable to a join, but it doesn't take care of this macro level stuff where I've got a whole bunch of things and I want to rotate this all the way around so that this line matches this line. All right. How do I do that? Well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to first select everything associated with this record. So I'm going to make sure that I select all the features. And if I don't do this, I might not have all the points or all the lines or something when I go to do a rotate. So it's always a good practice to go and make sure, let's get off of this, make sure that you go and you select all the features assigned to that. And then I'm going to go to my modify here, and I'm going to go and rotate. I'm going to take and rotate this entire selection. In essence, I'm going to rotate this entire record by going and here's my anchor for my rotation. I'm going to hold down my control key while I'm over that anchor and move it down to here. Say, okay, that's where I want to rotate it. Now I can either hold on to this green ring or make sure that I am over part of what I have selected and move it around. All right. Notice nothing happens until you hit the finish on here. Then it will go and rotate it all. Okay. Here's one of the issues associated with the current parcel fabric. And I actually had a discussion about this earlier this afternoon. The current parcel fabric tracks the polygons and the lines and some of the points, but it doesn't necessarily map those points with the ID, the global ID. So when I said select everything associated, what happened with the points that were out there? They were left as orphans. That is fixed in 2.6. That is fixed in 2.6. I can tell you. So now, I mean, that's in place, but I still have these things here. So I'm going to go in here with 2.5, go in here and select these and delete these out. So there's certain functions inside of here where it just didn't want to do that. By the way, now that I've deleted all this, it no longer is in compliance with the rules. So I can just say, go ahead and build this again, and it created all those corners again for me. Okay, so the corners, they're not as critical at this level of the parcel fabric yet. They are getting there. 2.6 is we're going to see some really big changes with the ability to go and do contingency checks to make sure that these numbers make sense, and then even to do things like a least squares adjustment on some of this that deals with the corners. At 2.5, it's not there. 2.6, which I think will be out sometime in July, it's soon, they'll become a little bit more important and they'll fix some of these things on here. So, do we have any questions yet? Anybody with any questions yet? Any comments?
None in the chat.
Okay. I'm going to show you one more thing today. All right. And so I'm going to go and discard all this stuff here. And I'm going to go and start again. I'm going to create a record here. Now, one of the things I did there was that I created a parcel and a traverse where obviously there was a difference between the bearings that were on the subdivision plat or the bearings that were on the survey or airing on the deed and what's in the rest of my maps. So how do I get it to automatically make that adjustment? Well, there actually is a way to go and do that. If I go to my edit tool, all the way at the very end is a ground to grid tool. It's also, by the way, at the bottom status bar here is a ground to grid, in which I can tell it, I can draw the ground line and the grid line on here. I can basically tell it, go ahead here, let's do it this way. Here it is. So I can draw this, let's get this out of the way, and say the bearing is supposed to be, let's do one south, let's make it obvious here. 45 degrees southwest, all right? And we're doing a scale factor of 1. Let's put it there. All right, next. So now I'm going to click on a point here and a point here, and it's going to calculate what this is. In this case, this actually, there's my bearing rotation, and I want to make sure I set this back to a scale of 1, not what was in there. So now, well, I've got this working. Make sure that this is on. Yep, this is on. Now when I go in here to my traverse, I do have an active record. Let's go to my traverse and set this location here. Now when I type in 45 degrees southeast for 500 feet, all right, it now, instead of being down this way, it will take and actually rotate things by that 313 degrees, and which is the difference between what I put in and what I actually digitized there, and allow me to go and rotate it. So now I can say, let's go 90 degrees to the left of that, 500 feet, 90 degrees to the left of that, 500 feet, 90 degrees to the left of that, 500 feet, come back to my, so when I'm finished with this, all right, when I'm all done with this, those lines that I just created, they actually have the document or the legal deed bearings and distances, but they will have been adjusted. So this is a, anytime you have a plat that has a specific basis of bearings or a scale factor on there, you can utilize this tool to go and make sure that it maps and it's going to be close to where it's going to be. Again, I can then go in here and create a seed. You see the seed there? And I can go and say build active, and it will build me a parcel for there. A couple other things. We had noticed here, I said that the Parcel Fabric makes sure that the rules are complied with. So some of the rules are automatically go and calculate the calculated area on a polygon that I build. So there it is, it calculated that calculated area for me. Also, it says that when I put something here, when I put something in the name field, copy it into the tax ID field. All right, and then finally, to go, and if I put something in here in the tax parcel ID field, which is that second one there, to go ahead and put a bunch of dashes in there and do that. So let me go to my attribution here again, and let's check those rules. So if I put in here, ooh, those must not be activated. They must not be enabled. enable this rule, sorry. That one there is already enabled. You have to go and save this first. The attribute rules take a little longer to go in and save and get active. Come on. Here we go. All right, so now if I go back here, all right, then you'll see that it went and actually copied that value over here, and it actually applied that second rule here, and it applied that first rule here to here. So again, the parcel fabric will make sure that you meet the topology rules of having all these structural elements on here. It will make sure that you meet the attribute rules that are enabled. Frank, remember that are enabled so that you can calculate and test things on here. It will allow you to go and input COGO values a couple different ways on here. And it will allow you to go and rotate and make things and adjustments in here. So what else would you like to go and have questions of today? Again, this is going to be interactive. I want you to ask questions. I want you to have a reason for being here, not just to watch me do magic tricks. You know, this is a conversation. This is a conversation. So what questions do you have? All right.
Can you show the clip tool?
Yes, I can. So again, Amanda, this is a file geodatabase. This is not a published web service, but I can still show the clip tool. So let's discard that. Get rid of that. Okay, let's do something a little bit more complicated here. Okay. All right. So let's go and create. Not sure what that is here. Oh, I saved that, didn't I? Select all the records in there. Let's delete them. Okay. I still have my active record here. Let's go and create a parcel, a polygon here. All right, and let's create a polygon here. Simple polygon. Let's go ahead and make sure it has all of the elements on here that it needs. By the way, let's get rid of that. Make sure it has all the elements, so it has lines and corners built in there. I'm done with that. So let's show a clip. A clip, what we want to do is we want to go and take the overlapping parcel of this record and delete it out of any polygon that it's on top of at the moment. So we want to be careful with this. In this case, if I do a clip of this parcel, it will delete out that parcel that it overlaps from anything that's overlapping. So there is a subdivision here called a CSM that it's on top of. There's a lot here that it's on top of, and there's a tax parcel that it's on top of. So if I just tell it to delete whatever it's overlaying that's turned on right now, it will clip all of those out. All right. So in here, I check on the clip, and I can do this. And again, if I wanted to go and clip everything underneath it, basically clean everything out, all I have to do is hit clip here, and it will go and clip them all out. All right, it will clip them all out. It will mark the old ones historic. It will create new ones, but those new ones will not have attributes on them. All right, so if I go in here, I should see that I have my tax parcel. There's the remnants here of that CSM, and here's the remnants of the lots. So let's click it over here. Here is the remnant of the CSM. Here's the here's the remnant of the lot. Remnant of the lot. Remnant of the CSM, remnant of the tax parcel. All right, and it will go and let's go in here, this one here, to the attributes, and it has calculated the area for me. It has updated the calculate of the area. It does not preserve any other attribution other than what you have the rules for. So basically it creates completely new polygons for that. If I go in here though to my historic polygons, and again, it's a mess because this is sort of my play area, but you will see here, here is my new tax parcel that I clipped. Here's my historic tax parcel. Here is the historic simultaneous conveyance, or the CSM. Here's the historic lot that it clipped. Oh, I had my section layers on. Here's my historic section, and here's my historic township polygon on here. So you want to be careful with the clip. It will clip anything that you have turned on at the time, and sure enough, I had those two on at the time. Another alternative to that is, let me go back here to here. So I've not clipped anything yet. All right, so I use the undo to go all the way back to the clip. And this time I'm going to do the clip, but turn that off here. Yeah. In this case, I only want this here. All right, there's my clip. So instead of saying clip everything, which is the checkbox down here, I'm going to tell it, nope, I want to choose what I clip out this time. And when I uncheck that box, it then goes and crosshatches what I'm going to use to clip. And then I can go back and I can say, okay, now show me what it's going to clip by going and checking on the target features. I can say, select all of them, show me what it's going to clip out of here. So what it basically is doing is it's finding everything with the a buffer of 0. So if you've got a point that's on the same point, it will also show that, just to let you know. So I can say, well, I'm really don't care about that, so I can unselect those points. The tax lines, yeah, go ahead and clip those. This tax parcel, yeah, go ahead and clip that. Conveyance lines, go ahead and clip those. There's my simultaneous conveyances, or my CSM, go ahead and clip those. But you know what? I don't want to clip that one. Let me see, where is that? Have I got these marked as? I've got that marked as unselectable. These are now selectable, and I can say, don't select that, don't select that. So I can tell it only what I want to clip on here. And then say, go ahead and clip it. It will clip them all out and do that. So there's two options on the clip function. There's the, this is the Tina Turner. You get the nice and easy one with the first one where you just say clip everything. But you want to be aware, you want to turn off the things, turn off the display on the things that you don't want to clip. And then there's the rough way, where you actually have to tell it, okay, what are you going to clip? Turn them on, turn them off, do that other stuff. All right, so again, there's two options on the clip, and you're going to find on ArcGIS, both in just the Pro editing and in the Parcel Fabric, most times there are multiple options and they do different things. You just want to kind of learn and become more familiar with the different options on them. So on this one, I'm going to do the same thing, but this time I'm not going to clip these things out because I've unselected them, and say go ahead and clip them. All right, and it will go ahead and clip them all out. If I turn on my historic, I can see them, and if I go into a select here, I should find that I do not have any historic. I did a select, I didn't clip that, so it's not marked historic. There's my section, there's my tax parcel, but here's the historic stuff that was before I clipped it out. Did that answer your question, Amanda? Again, you want to be aware. Again, when I teach somebody, what I usually teach them is make sure you turn off the display of the layers, because if the display is turned off, it will not clip them, no matter what the other settings are. But if the display is on and it's allowed to go in, be edited, it will clip them. Just be aware of that. Okay. Amanda, you have concerns. Do you want to voice them? Let me go and Amanda. Talk to me, Amanda.
Okay, so can you hear me?
I can hear you, yes.
Okay, so I noticed that you did not have the section and township layers checked on as being selectable, but the clip tool automatically selected them for edit.
But remember what that clip tool says on the bottom of it. It says clip not what's selectable, but what is editable.
Uh-oh.
Editable, okay? If we go here, clip all editable features, not selectable features, but editable features is what it's doing, okay? Just, you gotta, Esri's always very precise in the way they word these things. Not always, it's not obvious what it means, but it is, so it's, even though I had it as not selectable, it was still marked as being editable. So that's why it went and clipped it. So
Okay,
that's the reason
gotcha.
why I say, if you turn the display off, it doesn't matter. It won't clip it because it doesn't see it. It has to see it in order for it to be able to go and clip it.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, good question though. I mean, that's a really valid thing, and I can share with you. There's a slight difference between the way I teach people how to do certain things and the way Esri teaches people how to do certain things. Again, we come at it from as cadastral mappers. We use this stuff every single day. And so to us, we sort of go through and we are constantly looking for little tips and tricks and what's the best way to do this and what's the best way to do that. And that's why we're constantly trying to get to that point. So when I teach somebody about clipping, it's okay, just make sure you turn these things off, turn them off in your table of contents for display, and you cannot clip them if it's turned off. Doesn't matter what the other settings are, you cannot clip them. All right, so we are now at an hour and a half. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop the recording. And I'm going to unmute everybody. And if you want to stick around for office hours, feel free. For those of you that don't know what office hours are, basically, we're just going to stick around and talk. Anything that you might have, anything you want to see, anything you want to talk about, and we'll stick around for a half hour or so and see where the discussion goes. Sometimes we get into some really interesting questions and discussion. Anyway, I'm going to stop the recording.
Thanks for attending, and we hope you enjoyed this workshop. If you have questions, would like some more details about anything we discussed during this workshop, or if you or anyone at your organization would like information about training, support, or ways in which we can help you with your GIS needs, please contact me at frank@pandaconsulting.com or call me at 561-691-3277, and we can discuss how we can help you with your needs.